Welcome to the AV Experience. I'm your host, Ryan Charpentier, joined by Ben Goff of Cinema Bureau. Today, we are going back into our series of 10 steps or roundabout 10 steps. We'll see how many we actually do. It's probably going to be more than that. To building a home theater. And today, it is about defining the space. So we've got a space that we're going to look at in Vectorworks. It's a raw space. And we're going to take you through the thought process, things you need to think about, go through, really put some time and effort into defining, because the things that you decide now and the more time you spend here in this moment, typically the better the end result. And frankly, the more money you're going to save in the long run, plus headaches. So, Ben, let's just jump right into this. You got a room worked up in Vectorworks. It's pretty bare bones.
Yeah, I've
Let's see where we go.
I've pulled together a room that we really did build. This was a consultancy project we did, so we can look at what we would do now, and then we can discuss what we actually did do. So I have a space. We talked last week about understanding all your constraints before you start. So this room had, because it was a real room, had constraints. It's got two doors. One goes to the rest of the basement, so that's habitable space. And this side, we had like a plant room. There was HVAC, heating, boilers, stuff. That plant room couldn't be moved. It had to stay there. So it's not a big room, and it's got two doors. And client wanted quite a lot of seats. Whether that's what we would advise in future, if we were designing from scratch with choice, but that's what they actually wanted in reality. So
now your measurement here are in
millimeters.
mils.
Yeah. So we can convert that to bald eagles per century.
Can you show both? Is that possible?
I don't know if I can easily. Let me just get a calculator up. So this room is internally 11'3" wide. And it is
15 feet long.
About 17 and a half.
Okay.
So
quite narrow. It's got some length to it.
Yeah.
Which is good. What's the room construction like?
So it's in a basement. And we had some control over that because it was being built. So I think it was breeze blocks, like air, like thermalite type blocks. It wasn't heavy concrete, but it also wasn't basic stud, as I recall. It kind of, for this, doesn't matter because we will decide what we want it to be. But it was each end would have been 1,000 tons of dirt. Although we found out, actually, in the real project, we found out really late that not very far away from this end, a neighbor had also dug a basement, and there really wasn't millions of tons of dirt that we first thought, because actually, as it turned out, it was not far away from the neighbor's basement. Like a foot, kind of. They were basically, these were terraced houses, so like their basements were basically touching.
Yeah. So what you would want to do in this application when you're sitting down and looking at this space, right? What I like to do is I like to go sit in that space. I like to take a chair, even if there's nothing in there, could be not even framed up. I just have a space that it's going to be. I'll go sit.
Yep.
And I'll try and visualize what that's going to be. And I'll have a pen and paper, and I'll just start writing down positives and negatives in a list. So in this case, you write out your dimensions, right? What is my width? What is my height? What is the construction of the room, right? Most of the time, this room is already going to exist. So you have to look at, what are the materials that this is made of? What is there insulation in different places? What is HVAC like? What are water lines like? What are any of the things that are in this room? Lay them all out and start listing positives, like what can I do with this space, and negatives, like what are my constraints. In this one, a big constraint is door locations. I cannot
Absolutely.
move those doors.
Yeah.
That is where they're going to go. So defining that and knowing this is where these doors are going to go. These are my limitations. This is X, Y, and Z allows you to better define the rest of the room. And one of the very next things, once you've defined, I don't think we're going to spend a too ordinate amount of time on like wall construction and stuff. It's more going to be defining locations for everything and such. Probably the next thing is seating.
Absolutely. Like,
where do you need to sit?
that's the process is going to be how many seats do we have to have? How many can we comfortably have? And defining of that number of seats, which ones are important to us. So we jokingly describe seats we don't care about as the drunk uncle seat. You know, you use it on Thanksgiving or Super Bowl Sunday. It's not being used regularly. No one really cares about it. You know, you just stick in your drunk uncle who doesn't care there. That is a very different seat to the bill payer's seat, to like direct family. So depending on how many people live in this home, like to me, that's a minimum number of seats that need to deliver.
Yep.
If you've got, you know, if this home, and in different parts of the world, this changes radically. You know, we've done jobs before where the client has said to us, I'm going to need 16 seats. Yeah, okay, that probably isn't going to fit 16 seats. How many do you really need? How many people really live here? And they're like, 16. You know, there's 3 generations of a family. By the time you add on the annexes, like the parents annex and the grandkids type annex, it's a 3-generational family, which in some parts of the world is completely normal. Suddenly, you really need that many seats because that many people actually live there.
So let's actually talk about the seats, right? The seats, if you were you start with primary seating position, right? Where do I need to sit?
So let's add a new layer. I'm going to call it seat placeholder.
And William, we're probably going to get to your question of what is bad about
absolutely going to cover that in a minute.
Rear walls, because it's actually going to get covered with seating.
So if this was a hypothetical room, Ryan, how many seats do you want to try and place in there?
2 rows. 2 rows of 2 rows of 3.
Okay.
If I'm being realistic. I mean, realistic, I would only do 1 row, but
sure.
Most
that's
people are
probably
going
not
to try
wide enough for a real sofa. Give me the width of a real 3-seat sofa. Because I don't want to pull up the actual one that's in the room because it's going to give it away.
72, well, 96 inches, standard sofa.
Okay.
72 to 96.
Cool. I've pulled up the real dimensions of one, which is 100. I'm going to call it 255. And this one has a depth of 100. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so I have a real sofa now. Let's copy and paste that. I have got 2 sofas. We can align these to each other. Oh, wrong buttons. Okay. So immediately, we've got a problem.
Immediately, we have several problems.
Yeah. I've obviously determined already which end is going to be the screen end. I think that's a given based on where the doors are. I've just assumed that's a given. Let's talk about
that for
why
a minute.
it's a given. So if I put the screen away from the doors, we're going to tuck a sofa somewhere up near the back, and we're going to tuck another sofa in. already that door can't fully open. Now, this door, I've got some choice about how that's hinged. I could really work with the builder and get that changed. It's
Let's
not
say
planned.
theoretically you could hinge both of them out.
Yeah, okay. In real life, I couldn't, but
But
let's say
we're
I can.
getting rid of real life. Let's focus on
Okay. So we've still, even here, we're going to walk in. I mean, if I pull that sofa away from back wall where I'd like it to be away from back wall,
Mhm.
you're walking in straight towards the sofa. Now
Yep.
that space is tiny. Let me grab a. Hold on.
Ruler.
Where's my correct tool? I want
Tape measure.
constrained layer
Hang on.
dimension. Okay. So that space we've currently got running down here. What, 18 inches?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not walking into 18 inches. So immediately, that's not going to work. Even if
And
I can push this all the way back to that back wall, you're still walking in really close.
And I want to be clear that some people, 18 inches, you walking directly into a sofa, maybe that's okay with you. But for Ben and I, aesthetics and usability of the space, because we're not necessarily designing rooms for ourselves, is critical. Another issue, not at doors withstanding, is speaker placements for
Yeah.
that. And this is now we're coming into, and this is applicable to both sides, right? If we've got the couch up here, we've reversed the room, put it the other way. Why is having it next to a boundary like that not necessarily the correct action?
So part of my thought process when let's just before we even do that, let's just have one more discussion on that 18 inches for that sofa and
Okay.
why it doesn't work. Let's remember we're looking at this in a 2D plan view right now. I'm going to have to put that rear sofa on a riser. I'm not digging the front down. I've got to build a
Mhm.
riser for the rear sofa.
Well, one
So
compromise there would be to not put it on a riser and just make the screen taller. Not saying that's the correct action. I'm saying you could do that in order to get around a riser because these rooms are definitions of compromise. What
sure,
way in a compromise they're going to be am I going to be going?
right.
And am I okay with that compromise? So when you ask yourself that question, hey, if I put the door here,
That
am I
yeah, that
okay
would
not
be
having a
too big a
riser? And to
compromise.
most
Like
people, that answer is going to be no. I
with that
need a
ceiling height,
riser
it
in
would be
order to
too
make
big a
this work.
compromise. So we're already determining that this is not the best orientation. But as you say, there's realistically two places in a room where we're never going to put speakers. No matter
Mhm.
how big the channel count gets, there's two places that speakers just aren't really going to go. And they're not going to go middle of the back wall because a center back is fairly rare. We might want a sub there, but it's unlikely we're going to want a main channel center back. It's
Mhm.
not particularly done anymore. So that's one spot where if you can have the door center back, it's not going to interfere with any speaker placement you want. The other is going to be between a front wide and the first surround. That's quite a big space that a door can go, and you're never going to be fighting to put speakers around it
That
because
is the ideal placement for a door.
it's my prefer. Like for me personally, that's my favorite place to have the door
Yes.
is
It's the least
on
intrusive.
right on the side, just the right amount down that side wall that you're not interfering with the front wide, and then it does not impact the room at all. I prefer to walk into a room and see the fronts of seats than the back of seats. I know some people completely opposite. They would rather have door bang in the middle. They want to walk in and they want to be on the elevated height, see the whole room open out below them, in front of them. Fine. They want to see the screen. That's not for me. My preference is that the doors will be at the front.
Yeah. And that
So
either way is okay. It's personal preference, but being able to define the space allows you to make those decisions. So now we've kind of talked about door locations. For flipping the room or doing it this way. This is a design choice that a lot of people make, and that is, "Oh, I want 2 rows." And I can have my seating in a great position, my reference position, in a great location if I put my rear row against the back wall.
So
Why is that a problem?
I don't know if the tools are going to work here. My next step in considering this would be, let's find out if this tool's going to work in this file. It might not because I haven't run all the scripts for it. Da-da-da. Let's just do that. Oh, it kind of didn't work. So let's not worry about that.
Was that modes?
It was going to draw a full mode map for me, but I have to run a script first to make it work, and I haven't run it, and we won't worry about that for now. So this comes back to the question we got right at the start from William. Why it's a problem at the back. So we talked in one of the first videos you and I did together about subwoofer placement and room modes.
Yep.
Now, we know that all 4 boundaries, all of these walls and the floor and ceiling, so it's the 6 faces.
Every boundary.
They are going to become high pressure areas. So low frequency energy builds up against those solid boundaries. So if I put a seat against that back wall, I'm going to get an excess of base, and there's almost nothing I can do about it because that base is going to build up. We are going to get high pressure build up on that outside boundary. We did do a full video on that really explains it in depth, but it's going to be a problem.
Now, Ben, can you EQ that? Can you fix that through EQ?
No, it's a reality. If you attempt to, you're going to take out a load of the energy that the front seats needed. So you could cut all that energy. You could just cut every, it's not going to be great. You're going to,
I guess the question that William's asking is maybe not a multi-seat environment, but let's say you had 1 seat and it was against a rear boundary. Could you EQ that?
It would be significantly less good to try to do it than to move the seat.
Because what ends up happening is you could EQ it, right? But it's always a give and take. And you may fix that, but you're going to create another problem.
Right. And that's before we even look at all the other speaker placements. Just looking at low frequency, it's going to be a problem. But once we start to look at all the other speakers, having it back here is going to be a real problem because we want our side surrounds to be somewhere between 80 and 110 degrees from us. So let's take that. Let me quickly find I'll do some lines here. Okay. So I'm going to take, this is my center seat, and we've got a line coming to the screen. Ooh, didn't complete that. So I'm going to want, where's the protractor? I'm going to want to get hold on. I'm not using these tools the way I normally use them. 1 second. I don't think I can use this tool until I've actually added the second line. No, I have to draw a line. We moved across software not that long ago, and there are certain tools I use in certain ways, and I have not worked out the correct methods for them. Here we go. So 90 degrees is here. So if I want to put the speaker at 90 degrees, it's already basically against the back wall. I can come a bit forward, up to kind of 80. It's not ideal, but I could do it. If I come round to, my absolute corner is going to get me, minus 10 is going to be right round the back here. So if I go perfectly straight, it's all the way back here. If I then want to surround backs, they're going to be directly behind the sofa. They're going to be all the way around here. And they're now going to play straight into people who are sat either side. So the problem is going to be what happens with surrounds here. When we then do the overheads, just like we had actually in the room we looked at Friday,
Mhm.
you're going to try and put overheads that ideally you want behind that row of seats, but you can't because there is nowhere to go behind them. So I would like to keep this at least 1 meter from a wall. It's not always possible, and sometimes it's not at all possible. But realistically, that's the last place I'd want it. Like against the back wall is my very least favorite place in the whole room for a sofa to go. I just don't want it there. It is the worst place for it to go. Like objectively, it's the worst place for it to be.
So, given that limitation and given the amount of space, because we are going to have limited space between these rows, would you do 2 rows in this room of dedicated seating?
If I had a choice, I would do 1 row of sofa and I'd put in a bar with some bar stools.
Yes.
That would be my choice. Let's just move that back and add a bar in. I'd put a bar in here.
Mhm.
That's really easy to run bar stools across the back, right?
Mhm.
I'm not going to add them all for a second. But what that does is it gets you way more people in a smaller area.
Without compromising, well, it still technically does, but limiting the compromise of the space. And it
But
actually
let's
can make the space cheaper in a way.
right. So let's be realistic. By the time we build a riser for the second one, which we are going to need in this room,
Mhm.
18 inches is not big enough to get any steps in.
Nope.
So the unfortunate reality of this room, which is not what we'd want, that sofa's going across there. That's just, there's no option on it.
Mhm.
Once I now take a dimension, okay, with this size sofa,
3
I've
feet.
got I've got enough space, right? I can make that work. I'd ideally buy a slightly smaller sofa. That would be preference. I'd like this to be 1 meter. So as a
A little
minimum,
bit wider
the
than that,
ideal.
but not much.
Um,
I mean, that's already 3 feet. So,
yeah,
regardless of all of that, the thing that we're showing here is that this is the workflow and the thought process that needs to be going on in your mind to try and define what type of seating you want. If you don't start with seating, you're not going to be able to make any other determinations in the space, right? I see Thibault saying, well, why aren't you talking about pressurization and sealing the room and all of that stuff? And my argument to that is, yes, that is important. And yes, that is something that needs to be talked about. But until we define how many people need to go in this space, I have no idea how much space I can even give up for that in a non built from the ground up type room, right? So you do need to define, as well as seating, what type of sound isolation needs to be done. All of that is part of this process. But I think seating is probably the number one thing that needs to be talked about when you're starting to define a room.
absolutely.
Because it's the
So
thing that dictates the most space and how much space is available.
yeah, and everything we can fix physically is something we don't have to fix electronically,
Mhm.
and that will always be beneficial. Like it's fixing it with planning is the best way. So at this point, no money has been spent because we're just moving things around on paper. Now, I wonder if I've got a photo. I will show you this. I'll try and find a photo and we'll pull it up in a second. When we teach this, so we do this as Facedia as part of it's become a 2-day workshop and it's working through the RP22 parameters. But when we started teaching this, I say this is like myself, Peter Ayler, Adam Pels. We've evolved a course that started from workshops and grew into 2 days.
Mhm.
And initially, I drew up a load of rooms that we got people to do calculations on. And Peter had a much better idea of using a laminator and a sheet of paper. And we laminate furniture. We give them seats, armchairs, recliners, like love seats, all these different seats, laminated with some white tack. Let's actually physically place them in a room. So we do this as like an arts and crafts project with integrators, showing them what happens. And by doing it with a pencil and paper and some little icons we can move around on graph paper, you don't tie yourself to a decision. So what I kind of need to make sure my clients understand, and everyone we're teaching this, is just because I've put that sofa there now doesn't mean it's going to stay there. This is going to be a circular process that goes round and round. I can put it there because right now I want it away from that door and I need an aisle. That was before I considered any of the room modes. So
Right.
I've now drawn in the halfway point. So I don't want this sofa on the halfway point. It's fine. The sofa's actual position, if I add a line in to represent the heads and just group that together. So the head's right back here. So we're off that halfway line. So that's a good start. I would find the rest of my modes, and I'm going to adjust these now to move them around those room modes. Where are you going next? Once now I've got a couple of sofas in place, what would be your next thing you would place, Ryan?
Screen.
Okay. So where do you want to put a screen? Are we going to put it flat against the wall?
I wouldn't.
That's a solid wall in a basement, right? So
Yep.
I'm definitely staying away from that.
Yes.
I'm
I'd
going
put
to
it
give
probably
myself,
a foot off.
yeah, that's what I was going to say. I'm going to give myself 300.
And going back real quick while Ben's doing this, putting the screen up, I keep going back to what Thibault said about pressurization. And Ben is absolutely right that we're just defining it. These things are going to move, right? Because when we go in and we say, all right, now I know I want this amount of seating, they fit. Now when I go in and I say, well, I want some level of isolation and I need to put more mass in the room, and we're talking about risset clips and double layer OSB and drywall and green glue and all of that. Well, now I'm going to take those walls and I may move them in 3 inches on each side. But then if I say, well, I can't afford to lose that space because of the seating, then the question becomes, all right, well, now we need to move the walls out in order to gain that 3 inches back. But without defining the seating and knowing how many people need to go in, where the screen needs to be, and the sizes and distances, you can't really make those determinations. And in my opinion, you're kind of working backwards because people are afraid of walls, like timber walls and such. But if they're non-load bearing, which in a lot of cases they are, they're not as hard to move as people think. So defining these main factors, the screen and the seating to start, you're able to make more informed decisions later on down the road.
Right. So I've now marked out the space where we're going to build a false wall. Trying to add some new things I can toggle here so I don't go over all the real stuff. So from there, you've got two choices to define how big the screen's going to be on that wall. So my preference is to
Can
stay.
you get rid of the back row? Because we're not going to use it. The back.
Okay, let's lose it for now. It's outside the room. If we're not going to have a back row, we might put this one centered. The reality is the client wants 2 rows.
Okay.
Let's leave it there for now.
Okay.
I have a preference of how close the screen goes to the sidewalls. And I'm flexible on this, but it will be where I start. So I try to stay 300 away from each sidewall. That would be my preference.
Well, let's start ahead of that. Let's start by going back to the Venn diagram and listing this thing out. What ask yourself, what kind of video experience do you want? And before you actually define the screen position, these are the questions that I would encourage you to ask. What kind of video experience do you want? What kind of base experience do you want? Because those things can influence how much space you need behind that screen wall and how much and how large the screen needs to be. And since we've defined the seating distance, we now have an idea of, okay, how big can I make this screen? And this goes back to sitting in that space. In an ideal situation for my enthusiasts that are out there, what I would do is I would take a projector in there and I would shoot it at a wall. And I would look at it and tell you to figure out how big of a screen you want. Take the guesswork out. Look at it, define it, and allow yourself not only to visualize, but to see in real space how big that image is going to be.
Right. And this is why I say nothing is defined at this point. So I've put a sofa somewhere where it theoretically could work. It's away from the doors. It's given us an aisle. It's not on the halfway line. It's not against the back wall, right? So this is not optimal for this room, but it is a plausible starting point. So I could determine my viewing angle from there and say, well, how big a screen do I need to make my viewing angle work?
Mm-hmm.
Or I can go the other way around and say, this is the biggest screen I can physically fit. Where would I want to sit to make that work? So I've determined my preference, keep the screen 300, so a foot off each wall. What does that give me as a angle? 56.2 degrees from where I've put this person's head right now. That may or may not be to the client's preference. And I'm not going to determine that there is a right or wrong here. Screen size is one of those few things that really is a preference.
Mm-hmm.
56.2 is actually lovely for me. I would really like that. What's your preference, Orion? Where would you want to be?
I'm bigger.
Okay.
I prefer it higher for sure. And I'm walking that walk. My suggestion again, don't guess at this. Don't sit there and say, well, I would like this viewing angle when you don't really know. Go see spaces. Ideally, put a cheap projector in that room and fire a blank wall or a white screen or whatever you want it there and look at it and figure out, is that as big as I want? However, do not do this. Don't take a TV and sit closer to it.
No.
Because your brain subconsciously knows that is not a big image. It will not have the same feeling, and it's going to lead you down a very misleading path. So, ideal situation in this, define the seating position. And in this case, you can be a little bit flexible because if you were only doing a one row, it is two rows, so you're kind of finite at this point. Put a projector in there and fire it at the wall and see how big you want to do it. Get that defined.
Yeah.
How big of a space you want. Don't guess.
So as a minimum, if you're building this room from scratch and you haven't got any of the kit yet, masking tape.
Yes.
Don't use a TV for this. Masking tape on the wall. Just get a feel for how big it should be. And you've got options to change it. If we want to go smaller, that's fine. Like if you don't like 56 degrees, which is where I just naturally put it from where I dropped the seat to my preference of keeping a screen off the walls, you can make a screen smaller. If you want to go bigger, one of two things happens. You start to encroach on the sidewalls, which to me is a challenge because I might want to put some acoustic treatment on those sidewalls. I don't know yet, but I might want to. If I've gone full width with the screen, I can't do anything on those sidewalls. I can't build them out for any kind of acoustic treatment. I can't put anything decorative there. I can't put any wall sconces decoratively down that end of the room because there's no space. So I want to stay away, but you might decide, we're now at 6 inches. Without moving the seat, I can get you 61 degrees and a 6-inch gap, or we're going to move the seat. So 61 degrees big enough for you?
I think so. Are we sure we want to define this as 2 rows? Are most
I think you'd be surprised how many people. Well, I would say every client that comes to us and just about every hobbyist wants to put too many seats in the room.
I agree.
Their starting
I'm
point is
say
they
I'm
want too
saying
many.
not what they want, but what they should do. And in my opinion, what they should do is move the seating back a little bit and put a bar table in there.
Okay. So if we take this, hold on, let me line this up.
I'm gonna tell you what I would do in this situation, which provides a ton of flexibility for the future. Because my motto in this is make future you, not hate past you. And the direction that I would go with this provides a lot of flexibility with that. So I would put in 1 row of seating.
Yeah.
I would do a bar top table. And
Okay.
then what I would do is what I did in the Mad VR Experience Center, and is actually what I recommend to most of my clients, is make the screen as big as you can. The beauty of big screens with masking panels is you can always make them smaller,
Sure.
but you can never make them bigger. And the other beauty of it is when you put in a screen like that. Now, I agree with Ben, having a foot on either side for acoustic management and such is hugely beneficial. Mine sits off about a foot, actually, so we're definitely on the same mindset there. Um, but you can always make it smaller. And not only can you make it smaller, but doing an entire screen, a full screen for the front wall, greatly simplifies front wall construction because now it's just a screen. There is no anything else. It's 2x4s, more than likely, and a French cleated screen on a wall. And then if you define or figure out, hey, this is too big, you mask it down.
Sure.
And it
I
gives
mean,
you
there's compromises to that, right? If to keep image to audio coherence, it means you're going to be pushing your front left and wide really wide. Again, I'd like to give a bit of space around them.
oh, I would still do probably a foot on each side, but
Okay.
I'm saying floor to ceiling, wall to wall within that space. And then if it is too big, mask it down. Use a masking panel, AT or not, use velvet like we've talked about
Yeah.
to mask that down. And now you have the flexibility to do whatever you want. And with video processors getting to the point that they are, Mad VR, Lumagen, the new one Luma, which I don't know what its capabilities are. I mean, you have the freedom to not be stuck on something like a 16:9 screen or a 240 screen or whatever. You can have the video processor manage that and you gain the immersion from it. You have more flexibility in doing this pathway. That's the direction that I would go in
Sure.
this.
So I've done what you suggested now, right? So let's have a look. If we define roughly our head position is about here.
Mhm.
So if we are looking at what is the biggest viewing
Maximum.
angle that could possibly work from there. Because if that doesn't work for you, if that's not big enough, we have to move the seat forward.
Mhm.
64,
That's pretty good.
that's decent. For
Mhm.
some people, that's going to be too big, right? There's no disputing that will be too big for some people. And as you say, we could leave the seat here and now make that smaller.
Mhm.
The joy of making it that big and using a bar, let's just draw a couple of lines and show. If we did still have this rear seat, I'm going to bring it back in for 2 seconds just to prove a point. If we did have it right back here, and we've gone with the biggest screen we can possibly fit, we end up with a viewing angle of, where are we at? Angular dimension. 39. Okay, so we're about 40. It's right on the limit of what I could live with. But that's with the screen. Realistically, I would never build a screen that goes right to the wall. So I wouldn't actually do that. And by the time you move these points in to where I really would put the screen, you're going to end up pretty small. So it wouldn't be ideal for me. Now, someone's just said, does anybody really sit on bar stools to watch a film? Probably not. Maybe.
They're overflow. Because I can promise you guys, the 99% use case, you're going to have 1 or 2 people in there. Maybe 4, depending on your family size. Do not compromise for the 1%. They do not care nearly as much about this space as you do. They will be more than happy sitting on like a comfortable bar height chair to watch sports, to watch a movie. You've got the space. Maybe you sit back there and enjoy the space and you give them the couch. It's don't compromise for the 1%. Don't do it. It's not worth it.
No, and I would say, like, the reality is everybody thinks when they build a room like this, they're going to invite their friends over all the time.
It doesn't
happen. But the reality is you probably invite them over for events. So those events are going to be big sporting events, etc. And if you've got friends over, the likelihood that you're inviting them over for a sporting event and you're going to sit and have some beers, it's more relaxed. Like, I don't think a group of friends necessarily always want to sit apart on sofas in 2 rows with a small cup. Like, when it becomes a social occasion,
this is more social.
This becomes standing room only. You know, you could get 7 or 8 people stood back here using the bar with a few beers. That's a really cool space for watching a big match. The sofa becomes where you sit with your kids and your family. That's people who live in the house, who are going to watch films there regularly. And this is why I said at the start, it depends who lives there. If this house had 6 people living in it,
sure,
then we've got no option, right? This sofa's coming back. So that's the decision is, do I really need it?
But gearing it towards the general enthusiast, removing that sofa, in most cases, from my experience, is the correct course of action.
Right. It now gives us, look, from where I've made the bar now, and this person sat back from a bar, you know, they could be stood behind the bar, still pushing towards 50 degrees. That's a really nice place to be.
Yep.
That's ideal.
Yep.
So yeah, I'm all for that. It's interesting, you know, the comments just come in, the concern about the 2 doors. You know, this is a reality of the room that has that constraint. So nothing we could do was going to remove those 2 doors. There was no realistic choice. Now, as I say, this is a real room that we were brought in as consultants way after it was designed. So it was in construction. The basement had been dug way before we were contacted. If we'd been contacted 2 or 3 years earlier, or even, I don't know how long it took to dig a London basement, like let's say a year earlier, we could have potentially come up with other options.
But most of the time, for most people in this hobby or looking for rooms, they're going to do it with predefined spaces. They're not building from the ground up. I know some of our clients do. They're like, I want to build a new room or whatever. I'm building a house, free reign. But most of the time, you have a defined room, and that is a limitation. The fact on the doors, in my opinion, if a door is done correctly, it really isn't a limitation for the space. It's not going to provide any less isolation or such. I mean, maybe a little bit depending on how you do it, than the actual walls, unless it's concrete. But a properly done door should not be a weak point for the room.
It's a cost compromise.
It is.
To do a room properly costs more than the equivalent wall.
It does. Absolutely.
If you need to isolate it, if you want to seal it, there is going to be a cost.
And
But
somebody else brought up, who's got the budget for that many lumens, though, Ryan? My point with it is, just because you make the screen that big does not mean you necessarily need to use the entire screen. You can do velvet masking panels, non-AT masking panels to make the screen smaller. But then if you upgrade, look, you've already got the screen and you don't have to mess with the front wall. The other advantage to it is, if you do a floor to ceiling screen, what I have found in my viewing, especially with one row, is your viewing angle, your eye height is almost smack dab in the middle of the screen. Of course, that depends on the ceiling height, but it feels very natural instead of you looking up like this. Now, of course, one of those definitions that we've yet to talk about is seating type for the couch. Is it a couch? Is it a theater chair? What is it going to be? Because if it's a theater seat, that may dictate or necessitate a higher screen. Because if you're going to lean back, I don't necessarily want the screen to be super low because my natural eye level or eye angle is going to be looking further up on the wall. So are we doing a couch or are we doing theater seating in here?
I am it comes down to what the client wants. My preference is I'm not a fan of typical theatre seating.
I'm not either.
It's not for me. I would prefer to do a couch. If I'm gonna sit with my family, I want to be. I certainly don't like for me personally, when I'm with my family, I don't want arms and cup holders. I want my kids next to me. Like, we watch films as a family. My kids are young.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not putting them in their own seats. That's not for us. So I would go against seating with arms and cup holders. I don't even necessarily need recline if they're a proper comfortable sofa. Comfort's the important thing. Like, it's not at this stage, the dimensions of it and the style of it are less important than.
Not only, though, is it comfort or the cuddle factor, theater seating is an acoustic compromise as well, especially for your rear channels, depending on if you're reclining or not. I mean, that headrest getting in the way can very well impact how audio is perceived in this room.
So I'm going to leave it as that sofa, which is a traditional sofa. It's a nice, nice.
Use your imagination. That rectangle is very nice.
I have got, where's my line tool? I want to take that again. So where we had that sofa, we had a 40-degree and a 54-degree viewing angle. If we did my preference of bringing screen in a foot, I can shift that slightly. Let's go from about here where we were before to there. Let's pull this one in. Let's do the same from the back. So we're still off the halfway point. I would be drawing in the other modes. Like, we've done a video on modes, and you really need to follow that mode. When we pick up next week on this room, I'm going to have drawn in a load of modes and put a sofa. We're going to have determined a sofa and a screen by next week. So we will pick up from there next week. But this week, we are going to still keep playing with them for a second. So angular dimension, what have we got? 59, perfect. That's ideal. 42. So if this was my room, that's where sofa and screen's going. That's what I would be doing. I love 60 degrees. I think 60 is lovely. I have no problem with 42. That 42 is going to climb a little bit if we had people go over for the game. What I would actually do is lose the stool and stand a bit closer to that bar, because I would be making this standing room only for a big game. And suddenly,
regardless of that, the people that are back there don't care. It's a social environment. It's a social calling.
We're at 60 degrees when I watch a film with a family. We're at 45 when I watch the game with friends. I am set. That is going to work for me.
Agreed.
So what we've not done at any point here, and this is the opposite, I think, to how most enthusiasts think about rooms,
Mhm.
is we have not once yet talked about the dimensions of that screen. We have moved seats around and looked at the width of the room and looked at angles to get the right viewing geometry we want. And we've not yet looked at how big that screen is. So I don't even know how big that screen is.
It's
It
9
is
feet.
going to be, let's pull it up here, 2860. Is that 9 feet? You with your crazy numbers.
Freedom units.
Yeah, 9.4 feet. So whatever that is in feet and inches, 9.4, give or take. Right, 9.5. It's okay. Now, we talked about lumens earlier.
Mhm.
That's not a terrible screen to illuminate.
No.
You know, if I'm in JVC territory, JVC's up to 3 meters wide, plenty of light. At 3.5 meters wide, it's widest I'd really want to take for my personal preference, a JVC. 4 meters wide, we're running out of light. Too big
Yep.
for my preference.
I know you mentioned that we had not once talked about screen. We have not once talked about equipment yet in this
Right.
space. And
Oh,
most enthusiasts do this backwards, where they're gonna get the equipment first and then try and design the room out of the equipment.
yeah,
When we're talking about screen size, since we haven't defined the screen size and we figured out the viewing angles, the beauty of this is you can say, "Okay, I need this," and then once you start figuring out before you even talk about equipment, do I value brightness? Do I value native contrast? What do I need out of my equipment? And then you start making these selections. You can then use the screen as a tool to augment those brightness needs. Do I need to get a positive gain screen? And using that as tools should to try and get the expected or needed experience instead of the
right,
other way around of buying the screen and then buying the projector that works best on that screen. We've got to use these tools as augmentations to try and get something better instead of compromising the room to work with the tool. That doesn't
yeah,
make sense. If I'm a trim carpenter, I'm not basing what I'm building around my tools. I am getting the correct tool to accomplish said job.
right. And these are where all these different considerations come in. So Johann's asked us, if you're doing waveforming, can you skip looking at the modes? Well,
Mm,
yes and no. So there's a region, a frequency region where waveforming is going to be really effective. And then there's going to become a transition where its effectiveness starts to roll off, and then where it's just not trying to do anything. That depends on the spacing between subs, the room dimension. You know, there's some calculations to do to work out how high in frequency it will be effective. But one of the really important things to remember with waveforming is you can't sit with it. It's not you can't. You for waveforming to work, it is not going to deliver the results you're after in that first meter from the back wall.
let me say this a different way, and that is that waveforming is not a get out of jail free card. If you can fix things or remove issues in the analog before we put them into the digital realm or before we start trying to deal with things in the equipment, the less those processes have to do and the better the end result is going to be. If we can keep things as natural as possible, ideally, you would not do anything, right? We would let nature do its course. Ideally, you would have nature be the speaker, nature be the emitter, and we wouldn't have to reproduce anything. So the further we move away from that, and the more we're having to correct all of these things using algorithms, using different software and processes or whatever, um, the less natural I think it potentially can feel. So to me, the answer to that question is I still would absolutely deal with room modes. If you can't fix something, try and fix it using something like waveforming.
Right. So I've just worked here on a 300 millimeter deep subwoofer, so that's not a big sub. By the time you put a 300 mil deep subwoofer a foot hard against the back wall, its front face, then give yourself a meter, you've ended up isolating all this room at the front. You wouldn't have sat there anyway, obviously doors there in this case, but you've taken up all that space to where we've got the bar stools anyway. So if this was a waveforming room, I wouldn't want anybody behind where those bar stools are anyway. So thinking waveforming is an immediate fix in a room like this, waveforming does not fix and give you this ability, oh, now I can put 2 rows in because I've got no modal problems. Your modal problems in that back half of the room will still be there because the wave needs time to propagate, to become a planar wave. Like the calculations of how it's trying to cancel it out don't work 3 inches away from the subwoofers. So your actual listening space with waveforming is no further back than we've got it now. So, right, you might say if you're going to have subs all the way on the back wall, using a traditional 4 on the floor subwoofer layout might give you more options to help the back row.
This is a danger that a lot of enthusiasts find themselves in that auto EQ is a get out of jail free card, and it's not. It can actually make things significantly worse. When I saw waveforming, this is not picking on Trinov at all. This is just an experience that I had when it first came out. They've learned a lot. I've learned a lot. The implementation's changed. Ben, I think you and I talked about this a long time ago. When I first saw it and heard it, it sounded a little bit unnatural because of the waves and cancellations that it was doing. I mean, we're students of reflections. We're students of decay times. Removing all of that sounds unnatural.
Right.
And if you're dependent on a system to remove these things from a room, moving, as I said at the very beginning or a few minutes ago, you're moving away from natural behavior. So if you can allow sound and curate and do this stuff in the analog, you're just going to have a better experience overall. It's the way of the world. You're compromising less. We don't have the technological expertise to be able to fundamentally fix all of these things with software yet. Will we ever? I don't know. But the time right now, we can't. So the more you can fix in the analog, in this case, limiting seating locations, if you were to use waveforming to try and get the best out of everything, the better. And you could put a seat back there. It would be the mother-in-law seat, the drunk uncle seat, where
Absolutely.
they just don't care. But that should be the expectation. You should know that going in so that you can define that.
Yeah. So a couple of points in there that we just had. I don't know how that's pronounced. Is it Theobald? However,
The bolts. I don't.
Theobald. Right. So I think this is a question or a statement. I'm not sure, but that 1 meter, I would define from the front of those subwoofers. If you
Yes.
take it as 1 meter from a back wall and you put 18-inch deep subwoofers, you're taking up a lot of room that they need to form that planar wave. So I'm not sure exactly how it's documented by Trinov, but I would take that as a meter from the front face of those subwoofers.
Yes, because
That's
energy is emanating from the front face of that subwoofer. It's not all going back off the wall and then coming back out.
right.
So it's important to go from the admittance.
If you can go in wall subs, we've done this in different ways. I've seen different arrays of how subs can be laid out, and you can potentially make that a bit narrower. But I'm allowing a meter plus the depth of the subs.
He says typo.
Sure. There was another point about with some 28s or 32s or a 64, the doors are going to be like Dumbo's ears. All I can say to that is you need better doors.
My door does not move.
No. So even if your door's not that solid, we build really heavy steel-lined doors, right? Really, really high mass. Even if they're not, there should be a rubber seal going around the door jamb that means that once that door has closed, against its latch, it should effectively be under pressure. the latch is holding it under pressure against a foam or a rubber seal on all sides of that door jamb, there is nowhere for that door to rattle, right? If it rattles towards the frame, it's going to hit rubber or foam. And if it pushes the other way, it's already under tension on the latch. Door should never ever, like, if you're not sealing it, any isolation you've done's null and void because all the air is just going out there.
Yeah.
So even a lightweight door seals are $20. It's no money at all to put a rubber door seal around that door jamb.
I'd still use a solid core door at the very least.
Oh, sure, but like irrelevant of what the door is, it should never rattle.
Ideally. Yeah.
Never. I'm not even going to say ideally. It should never rattle. If it rattles, go and do it again. Like it just shouldn't ever rattle.
Okay. Yes.
It's $20 to
agree.
fix it, right? Just fix it.
Should we leave it there? Do we have anything else to define about the screen and the seating?
No, today we've got to a seat and a screen. So we'll pick up from there next week.
Yeah. I would agree. Any questions about, I think we've been hitting the questions as they go on. This is going to be a long process. And I think that's going to highlight for people that the more time you spend in this, the better the end result is going to be. I mean, again, Ben and I have not even talked about equipment yet. We've been talking for an hour and we have not once talked about equipment until it came up in questions about waveforming and doors.
Yeah.
It's equipment is a means to an end. It should be used as an augmentation to reach a means. We're still trying to define the means at which we want to meet. And then we can compromise away from this depending on what needs to be. We can move things a little
Yeah.
bit to make things work, like the room and isolation and different things like that. But once we define, we can do that after we define the experience. And then if we define the experience and then we get to something and we have to make a compromise, we can potentially decide, do I want to spend more money in order to get around that compromise? And my compromise is money, say for room isolation or what have you, or will I compromise on the experience to make that whatever work?
Right.
But without defining the experience and defining the seating, at the very least in the screen, you
Yeah.
can't really make those determinations and
Yeah.
decisions.
This bit is still basic design, right? So this is not engineering yet. We are doing the basic design. So the process is discovery, design, engineering, specification. So we are still doing basic design. This is a basic layout, and everything you do at this stage is money in the bank because you're going to prevent mistakes down the line. You're going to prevent buying equipment that doesn't suit the purpose. Like, do it as many times as you need on paper. Build it once, build it right the first time, put the right equipment in. So we're close now to being able to define the first pieces of equipment. If we lock in those decisions, which I honestly would not lock them in until we've put speakers and modes in, because we might find a problem and start this whole process again. But if we locked those in, we could now put a projector in and work out throw distance, brightness. We could order a screen at this point because we know how big it's going to be. But after this hour of design, we are still way premature to start putting a projector in the room or ordering a screen. We've got a few more hours of work before we would even be ready to put an order in for a screen.
Yeah,
and
at the very least.
Next week, we'll see why.
Yep. Okay, we'll wrap it up. This has been Defining the Space, 10 steps to building a home theater. Is going to be a lot more than 10 steps. Well, at least defining the space is going to take longer because we spent an hour just talking about seating locations and screens. As sexy as that, you better be an enthusiast to enjoy this one. I know I enjoy it, and hopefully this has been beneficial for all of you guys.
What is fun is this room is now no longer like the real one we built.
Yeah.
Because different needs. We've agreed needs for a sofa and bar stools. This client actually needed 2 sofas.
And that really was a compromise. He was unwilling. He was something he was unwilling to compromise on.
Yep. Well, and they really needed it for the number of people that will regularly watch films. So we've already deviated completely from a design I did in real life because we've defined different needs. And that's why for any given box, you have to design it for the people using it and not define it for that size and shape box.
Well, we will wrap it up from here. Thanks for joining us. This has been another episode of the AV Experience. This has been 10 Steps to Building a Home Theater, defining the space. If you guys need equipment, have questions, need design help, or anything in the like, feel free to reach out to Ben or myself. Our contact information is down below. We do this professionally, though we are happy just to answer questions should you have them. We will be live again with a room in review on Thursday morning at 8 a.m. Central, and we will see you guys then. Have a good one. Stay safe.
Cheers.
Enjoy those home theater journeys. See you later.